All right. This is it, folks. Our last segment this morning. Thanks for riding with us. We appreciate those of you who capture and listen to our video live, our audio podcasts, our stuff up on YouTube. Since I put that podcast player in and giving you guys the ability to download these in an audio format, audio only format, boy, I've seen a sharp jump in that. So that's a good thing. I hope it gives you a way to expand your listenership and your own. You know, I encourage you to, and listen, I know people say, this guy does this because he's got some big ideas of himself. Let me tell you something. I really don't. The truth of the matter is, I would love to not have to do this. It's dangerous. I am an obvious and neon-coded target. There's no money in this. I don't get paid. I pay for this show and everything that's around it, all of this equipment, all of the services that has to be done on the web, all of the payments that have to be made. I go to these meetings and I speak at places all over the place. I do interviews on different radio shows all over the country. Nobody pays me a dime. I don't earn a penny at this. It costs me money. So trust me when I tell you, this is not for some grandiose ego. I would love nothing more than to go live out in the middle of nowhere and mind my own business. But somebody's got to speak out because we are at a point where without some Paul Revere riding through the community, alerting the citizenry to be awakened and aware and prepared, we're losing it. And we're losing it quick. The court system is just as bad as the legislative system, just as bad as the executive system. I saw an article the other day that I thought was very, very well expressed. It was on the Free Beacon, freebeacon.com. I'll put a link to it in the body of this YouTube video. And the title of the article is, and it's written by an attorney. A guy's name is Clark Nelly, and he's for the Institute of Justice, or for Justice. And his article is pretty clear. It says, courts across the country are abdicating their constitutional duty, permitting the growth of government intrusion by deferring cases. This is judicial activism, and it's more than that, actually. This is not limited just to a case of judicial restraint in hearing cases or deciding on cases that they don't want to allow to become precedent. This is actually far beyond that. What it is judicial terrorism. And I'm going to clarify and expound on that in a moment. But I want you to understand what's going on. You are being terrorized right now by every facet of your government. And it's time that you acknowledge the truth of that action, of that statement, of that reality. Because a reality it is. Courts across the country are abdicating their constitutional duty and permitting the explosive growth of government intrusion by deferring cases to show restraint. This guy has written a book. His name is Clark Nelly. He's the senior attorney at the Institute for Justice, and his new book is called Terms of Engagement: How Our Courts Should Enforce the Constitution's Promise of Limited Government. And he says that all courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, are deferring cases that involve their decision-making on powers that the government branches exercise. And they're deferring them because they're exercising their own judicial restraint. Now, here's the stunning part. As a result, the Supreme Court has struck down only 103 of the last 15,817 federal laws passed between 1954 and 2002 alone. Holy crap. That's 2/3 of 1%. Are you going to try and tell me, intellectually, honestly tell me, objectively tell me, that only 2/3 of 1% of the laws passed by government in the last 65 or 70 years are fairly struck down? In other words, that 99.7%, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, 99.6% of all the federal laws that have been passed in the last 65 years are legitimate. None of them are overreaching. None of them are oppressive. None of them are, come on, I don't buy it. He's calling this judicial abdication. For the record, abdication is when you have abandoned. Abdication is an abandonment. A king abdicates the throne when he says, that's it, I no longer want to be king, and I abdicate the throne. Pick somebody else. The courts are abdicating their duty, their responsibility, and their requirements under the Constitution. This is an unwillingness on the part of the courts, including the Supreme Court, to fulfill their constitutional jobs and roles and obligations and duties. He calls it an impenetrable bulwark against every assumption of power in the legislative or executive. James Madison's gave us that, and he references it. He's actually calling for judicial engagement by advocates for the Constitution in the court system, in the judicial system, to curb the surge that we're seeing in this tsunami of federal regulations and responsibilities. Do you know that the EPA just announced 6,000 new rules to go into place January 1st? 6,000! We're not ruled by Congress. We're ruled by extra-constitutional administrative agencies. Congress doesn't pass any more than a couple of hundred bills a year. But they've delegated, subdelegated, unconstitutionally, our authority, which we've given them as a power of attorney, to extra-constitutional executive agencies and administrative agencies that we have not approved of. We don't elect them. We don't have any power over them. And then those people and their administrative agencies further subvert the Constitution by not even giving you a trial by jury. You are heard by an administrative law judge who works for the administrative agency that is persecuting and prosecuting you. How flippin' insane can that be? That takes the term kangaroo court and gives it a whole new meaning. You mean to tell me that the judge that hears you in an administrative case that is ruling between whether you are right or the administrative agency that he works for is right is going to give you justice? Please. Here's what he writes. The framers didn't expect the other branches to obey the Constitution. That's why they created the judiciary. In other words, to hold them back so that they would act as the bulwark, the impenetrable bulwark, in James Madison's language, the impenetrable bulwark against every assumption of power in the legislative or executive. That was the job. The job of the judiciary is to act as the seawall, protecting you from the onslaught of the waves. This guy's no slouch. He's the guy who argued in the District of Columbia versus Heller in the Supreme Court. The one where the Supreme Court for the first time ever came out and said, yes, the right to bear arms is an individual right. Not a collective militia right, but an individual right for every Tom, every Dick, every Harry, every Lucy, every Cecile. He goes on to say that the duty lies with the judiciary, and they, as a system, are shirking that duty and have been for a long time. He points to the Affordable Care Act as one of the prime examples. And he's right. He calls it a preposterous reading of the statute, because the mandate is actually designed not to enable, but to coerce and compromise and force people into a funnel, a chute, to coax you into buying insurance rather than to regulate interstate commerce and to raise revenue. This isn't a tax law. This isn't a raising of revenue. This is coerced theft. He's got a very easily understood point in this article. He notes that in one case, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, this is, by the way, the only court that actually ruled that Obamacare was unconstitutional. Then it went to the Supreme Court, right? And they ruled after they ruled Obamacare unconstitutional, before it went to the Supreme Court, they followed up that particular case that they had heard with another case in which they granted the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Listen to this one, because this is going to blow your mind. This court approved and ruled that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has the authority, the constitutional authority, to regulate six-toed cats at Ernest Hemingway's house in Key West, Florida. It almost sounds like an Alice in Wonderland kind of book, but it's the truth. The U.S. Department of Agriculture went to court to determine, and this court approved it, that they have the authority and the power to regulate six-toed cats at Ernest Hemingway's house, which is now a museum in Key West. This bizarre case involved undercover agents. Undercover agents. This is the truth, folks. This is what your taxpayer dollars are really being spent on. Involved undercover agents surreptitiously shooting photos of the cats, and even an unannounced trip to the museum by a federal judge, which has been turned into the house of Hemingway, which is now a museum, of course. The court ruled in the end that the cats were covered under the Federal Commerce Clause because the museum sold cat-related merchandise. What? What kind of circular, nonsensical logic is that? So because the museum sells cat-related merchandise, the Department of Agriculture has the right to regulate the six-toed cats there. And what do they care about regulating six-toed cats for in the first place? I mean, who cares? Six-toed pedactyl cats exist. What are they going to do? Put out an order to sterilize all six-toed cats? I mean, I don't get it. And who cares? And why? And why are we expending resources on this kind of nonsense? Because it's not really about anybody caring about six-toed cats. It's about them instituting their authority to dominate and rule and oppress you. Listen, our judicial system is rife with examples. There was a woman, you're not going to believe this one, a woman named Sandy Meadows, and in 2004, she was a widow, and she lived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So here's what happened. Her husband died, and of course her income ceased. She was an older lady, and she decided that in order to get work, she was going to obtain a license to be a florist. Whoa, stop right there. A license to be a florist? Yes, because in Baton Rouge, they require you to be a licensed florist. So she went out and she took the class, and she tried to take the exam, and she failed it 5 times. It includes a written test, and you've got to have, it includes an actual laboratory test where you've got to make 4 floral arrangements in 4 hours. But here's the problem. And you'd say, well, how hard could that be? I mean, right? The problem is that the exams were graded by a panel of working florists who have a vested interest in not allowing new people into the floral business because they're potential competitors. What the hell kind of a kangaroo court is that? Louisiana is the only state in the country that licenses florists. By the way, for the record, wait until you hear these numbers. The passage rate for the floral exam is only 36%, but the passage rate for the state's bar exam to become an attorney, that's 62%. Tell me there's not a little dirty shenanigans going on there. So you mean to tell me that 61.5% of all the people who take the state's bar exam to become an attorney pass, but only 36% of the people who actually take the florist exam can figure out how to make a floral arrangement that meets the obligation, that meets the requirements of your future competitors? The woman had to go to court. I mean, how ridiculous is this? The Louisiana Horticulture Commission, talk about an onslaught of nonsense in the courts. They pressured an Albertsons grocery store to fire her because she wasn't licensed. So they did. The store ended up cutting her loose. They told her, hey, listen, I'm sorry, but you don't have a florist license, so we've got to let you go. She appealed to the court on a federal level, saying, this is unconstitutional. You can't have Louisiana forcing me to become a licensed florist. I mean, what's the danger to the public if I make if I put the hydrangea in with the rose? Oh, I know that's a major faux pas, but where's the danger? Well, guess what? They fired her. She lost. Wasn't long because after that, 3 months passed. They fired her. She wasn't able to find another job. And you know what? 3 months later, Sandy Meadows, she died. That's not bad. What's really bad is that she died alone. Without a phone, without electricity, without a car, without any food in her home. 3 months. That's all she lasted. Three lousy, stinking months. In Louisiana, as corrupt, they're guilty. Guilty as charged of a crime against humanity. And that's the tip of the iceberg. Those of you who have been listening to me for a long time know that when it came to Morningland Dairy, I fought for Morningland to be able to keep that cheese. They were a dairy maker of cheese. And they didn't pasteurize their cheese. They sold it as raw milk cheese. And the Missouri Milk Board, which is funded and lobbied by the Dairy Association, who doesn't want unpasteurized products out there, went in and found his cheese to be problematic. They falsified lab tests. They refused to allow him to have it tested independently, and they declared it all to be destroyed. An administrative law judge pulled out of retirement and set in place specifically just to hear this case, upheld their decision. And they destroyed 36,000 pounds of cheese. It's all over the internet. Go look it up. It's under Morningland Dairy. Morningland Dairy. I've got videos that were shot. You'll see me in the video talking to the people, to these milk board guys who came one day to destroy all of it. After a 2-year court battle, he lost. The owner, Joe Dixon. They destroyed 36,000 pounds of cheese. I'm talking about cheese blocks here that were the size of cinder blocks. A trailer full of them, a refrigerated trailer where they had stored it, where it was stored for 2 years while they fought through this in court. The family was bankrupted. They lost their farm. They lost their business. They were living like savages in a cave. There's no justice in our judicial system. And is it any wonder with people like Eric Holder leading it? Is it any wonder with Barack Obama, who is giving direction to what prosecutorial benefits that he wants to give? I mean, you don't have the ability to utilize prosecutorial discretion. That's unconstitutional. It's illegal. It's dictatorial. It's authoritarian, totalitarian. It's tyrannical. And your judges and your court system. Ryan Ferguson, a young guy here in Missouri, accused of a murder. Prosecutor knew he was innocent. Hid the evidence. They gave him life. Spent 15, 18 years in prison, only to be freed later on. But only under public pressure. There are tens of thousands of innocent people in prisons. There are tens of millions of innocent people who have been stripped of their livelihood, their life savings, their businesses, their opportunities, their freedom, their liberty, their opportunity just to try to make ends meet and benefit by the fruit of their labors. And the courts are protecting all of it. So when you hear me say that not only must America march upon this nation, this capital, your state capitals, and demand the ouster and the removal of the entire administrative and executive branch and the entire legislative branch, which have shown to be so absolutely abjectly corrupt that they cannot make any decent decision on the behalf or under the oath that they have taken. I don't mean just them. I say judicial too. Every federal judge, you're out. No more appointments to federal judgeships. The Supreme Court, all 9 of you, see you later. That sounds radical. Hey, is it any less radical that we are falling into fascism? Wake up and smell the coffee, America. It's growing around you like a weed every day. The walls are being built around you, and at this point, they're so high, you can barely see above the top. You're falling into fascism. If that is not diametrically opposed to what you expected for your nation, if that is not a massive leap, then you shouldn't have a problem with accepting the idea that everything in all government agencies must go and be restarted under a constitutional republic with the goal of living within the boundaries and the framework set by the Constitution. That was the original plan, ladies and gentlemen, and for the past 100 years, we have completely ignored it. We have allowed it to be abdicated. We have abdicated our responsibility, our duty, our obligation to make sure that we stood there and said, not today. And if you allow one tyranny to occur, you'll allow 1,000 tyrannies to occur. This is no less a revolution than the revolution that was announced and declared in 1776. It is no less. It's just happening in your time. But mark my words. You may look at that as quaint history, but you're failing to see it happening right in front of your face. No, we don't need to do this armed. We don't need to do this in a violent way. We need to do this as Americans who rise up and say, collectively, we will take no more. We will not tolerate it anymore. We're not asking you to make changes to the laws that you have already passed because you've been bought and paid for. We're not asking you, courts, to make decisions that go against your previously purchased decisions. We're not asking you, executive, to make decisions and to make things right, because we know that you have already been corrupted beyond salvage. We're not asking you. We're demanding that you leave. We're not asking for your resignation. We are firing you. We are terminating your employment forthwith. And then, then and only then, can we do what we know to be the right thing. We can do what our founders did. We can do exactly what we were told to do. When we have been faced, and it is clearly proven that we are under absolute despotism, it is our right. Nope, sorry, stop there. It is more than our right. It is our duty to throw off that government and to provide new guards for our future security. Guards who will adhere to and believe in the principles of this Constitution. Guards who will believe that it is not the government's role and the government's job to subjugate you and to rule over you, but to operate on your behalf. To stay out of your life, frankly, and to rule in those areas only that they have been given express authority to act. But to regulate who you can do and what you can do and where you can do it and how you can do it and who you can be in business with and who you can't compete against. To demand that you must do this or must do that. To bribe and coerce and co-opt your state legislations or your legislatures with money and bribery. To try to circumvent and co-opt and corrupt that government. That is immoral. Dishonest, unethical, unconstitutional. And it is against the laws of God and man and the laws of nature. And nothing will do but that activity cease. Our failure to stop that activity will be our undoing. The courts are no different than Congress. They are no different than this executive. They are all working together to your demise. They get no pass. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. You can find our stuff on Facebook at our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. Even if you're not a Facebook user or a member of Facebook, you can still visit that site because it's a public page. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can listen to our audio downloads there, and you can download them directly from there. You can also find all the articles and stories we post. You can find every audio and video program that we do on YouTube by going to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. You can also go to our Spreaker channel and download the podcasts into a mobile phone or anything else you want. And you can go there by going to Spreaker.com. That's like speaker with an R. Spreaker.com/America's Voice Now. Have a good weekend. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless.